Om Namah Shivaya. Hello and welcome. Welcome to the Aya Om podcast. I thank you for sharing your breath and your energy with me. Blessings and good chi. This is the podcast about manifestation. It's definitely on the minds of, every spiritual person, right? Because at a certain point, you realize how your thoughts turn to things. You realize that where you place your attention, energy flows. And the more you understand that you're a conscious creator, a co-creator in this universe that we all share, the more aware you become of how your thoughts influence your emotions and your body, and how your thoughts influence your actions, and how your thoughts influence the very nature of reality and what shows up for you in your life. So this podcast is about manifestation. I'm going to share with you my manifestation formula. But before we get into that, before we get into the manifestation that can help you to create your dreams, to find more alignment in life, to learn to listen to the deepest parts of you to help guide you through the sometimes tumultuous life, but it's a beautiful ride, no less, no less. Let's get at some of the underlying energetics of how manifestation works, because more important than any articulation of a manifestation formula, because there are many, and you can read all the different ones from all the different teachers, the underlying energetics are the same. The articulation and the steps will be different. Once you understand the basic mechanics, then you know it. Once you really understand the basic mechanics, not just intellectually, then you can operate like dancing with the universe in a beautiful way. And your fundamental stance as a conscious creator can shift form so that the dreams, the reservoir of desires that you have, can come out. So as I say that, that's going to be my starting off point. Desire. Much has been said about desire in the spiritual traditions. And there's a point to desire being a negative thing that I want to bring up first. Because that's something resonant in the conditioning of many individuals. That's something I had to work through myself. There is much said about the negativity of desire. And in truth, there is negativity in the sense that if we are craving sensations and experience that are outside of ourselves, this can create suffering. This is one of the Buddha's great revelations that he shared with us. This is the Siddhartha Buddha. So we can have a negative relationship to desire if we're craving things outside of ourselves that we don't have. Because what happens then is we're in a current state of being. And when we're focusing our mind on what we don't have, we're focusing on lack, we're focusing on negativity. And that direction of our mind is a spiraling force that continues to call in and attract more of the same. Now, there are different spiritual paths. Let's recognize that. Let's know that. I would say the path of manifestation is different from a traditional path of enlightenment. And now, that's a pretty broad statement, and everyone has a different understanding of the path of enlightenment and how to go there. We could talk about non-dual and dual, and let me get really clear on my definitions here. I'm speaking, and I touched on this in my last podcast, about spirituality versus soulality. And I used the word spirituality different than most people use the word spirituality. I'm talking about the path of enlightenment that is the transcending of the body and the mind. And in this version of the spiritual path, one aims to transcend desire, to transcend the body and the mind. They're not looking to have the human experience. as what I term a soulality spiritual path, where one is looking to work with the soul integrated in the body to experience thoughts and feelings and to go through the life of a human. This is essentially a non-dual pathway, the soulality pathway. The dual pathway would be transcend body, mind, illusions, and maya. So a traditional pathway, and there are many ways to do that, typically through meditation, typically through detachment. Typically, the pathway is much more masculine. Solitude in a cave would be a great way to practice this at its high end of the polarization spectrum, because we can be all along the spectrum. Some of us are more in the middle path, some of us are more in the complete surrender path of the soul. So in that kind of understanding, desire really of all kinds is to be transcended. Now, most people don't walk this path. I'm sure 99.9% of my listeners aren't walking this path, because most people in the Western world and most people that I know aren't looking to transcend the entire human experience. At least that's not what their actions show. Typically, those walking that path become renunciates. Because if you're looking to transcend all desires, you don't want to have a human life. You don't want children for that. This in its extreme, in its extreme. So most of us, as I understand it, are walking more of a middle path, which means they may take part in some of those practices to learn valuable skills that can help them in their life, such as detachment, such as meditation, which is beyond the body-mind, which I call true meditation. But many of us are in a connection, not with our spirit, which is that transcendental state, but with our soul, which is the individual aspect of the source energy, which moves, which knows itself through the body. This is different from living from the ego through the body. It's an important distinction. The ego has desires, typically selfish desires, but desires for the self, like pleasure, are not simply evil in that sense, because it's the level or the depth at which you're experiencing them. So the ego is a limitation. It's a construct of the mind. And the ego knows itself as mind, as personal mind and body, and nothing beyond it. If an individual is deeply interwoven and connected with their soul, they can experience themselves as mind, body, and ego, and yet know themselves as something transcendental to that. And yet in that recognition, they don't aim to transcend the body and the mind in this life, but they aim to experience the body and the mind. This opens them up to be a householder, a family person, to engage in spiritual process and practice, the purification, the meditation, as well as ceremony, communion, sex, all the things that make this human life a human life. The recognition there is the soul came here, it incarnated to have a human experience, and enlightenment is not the ultimate aim in the sense that we must disregard all things and abandon the life that we live, the family that we have, the desires that we have, to go off and live in a cave. Both paths equally valid. But the individual integrated with their soul listens to the soul's calling for a life. Ultimately, the soul, as I see it, is a more feminine pathway, wanting to express and experience, and knows itself as in a non-linear fashion. I'm going to go too deep into this because I made a whole podcast on it. But what I want to express here is there is a different relationship with desire as articulated from a Buddhist, who I would typically place more into the spiritual pathway of detachment, of full realization beyond body and mind. and then desire from the ego, limited to the ego's desires, and then the desires of the soul. So what I'm offering is most individuals who are listening to this podcast are connected to their soul, wanting to have a human experience, and they have desires, and these desires are divine. These desires are impulses from the deepest parts of them, from their true nature, desiring to deepen itself into the human experience, which is a non-dual way of entering into reality, which is not the same as the way that the ego approaches desire. Now, you may have the same desires for food and sex, but there is a different characteristic. The soul can go deeper into any experience because the soul is so much deeper than the mind and the body. It's not fractured in any way. The soul is whole. And you can experience your totality, which means everything within the frame of body and mind, and something beyond, something transcendental. So then there is this impetus to know the soul in order to receive the soul's communication, because there's a little bit of misinterpretation and communication of some of the basic systems of the body-mind when we're not connected with the soul. I see this come up in some pop psychology things where they want to invalidate following your feelings because your feelings are irrational, and that your feelings are highs and lows, and they'll guide these kinds of silly things. And my understanding there's a miscommunication there. It's not quite what's happening, because yes, there are these superficial emotions, there are these highs and lows. And when an individual is just in their ego, they would be wise not to listen to every high and low, because that's a victimization. Most of those emotions, if not all of them, are reflex of reactions to the patterning in the system, the imprinted conditioning. The pathway of following your emotions as guided by your soul is completely different. Your soul speaks through your emotions as a guidance system. When you are feeling good, your soul is guiding you. When you are not feeling good, your soul is guiding you. When you are feeling good, you're on the pathway of least resistance and expansion. When you're feeling contracted and negative emotions, your soul is telling you, you're in the wrong place. It's clear as day. If we don't listen to our emotions, we completely throw ourselves out of our communication with the deepest part of us. And then it's easy to get in our head or to start listening to the collective trance of mass media and all the things that can get in our mind, which can take us away from our inner compass, which is the one thing that will never get us lost. It doesn't need large data sets, which doesn't need the news, which doesn't need anything, because it recognizes truth as a harmonic vibration. It recognizes truth because when you're in good relationship with your soul, the words that you say as they come out your mouth will have a sense and feel that rings out like a perfect chord played. When you're in alignment with your soul, you exist with a certain frequency that vibrates in a way that feels so good. That's really it. It feels good. And when someone has an untruth, when you're in a place that is out of harmony, you feel it. This is so key. Your feeling is so important to manifestation. Okay, let's put a little flagship there. So desire. Desire is not bad. We need to release conditioning that desire is bad, because we have to recognize that what the soul is asking for is good. So that's an important calibration. What the soul is asking for is good. Doesn't matter what kinds of experience, all the religious conditioning about sex is bad or this is bad, that is bad. We need to come into harmony with the deepest and truest parts of ourselves to inform us as to what actions and experiences we desire to have for the learning of our soul. Now, when the soul guides you, maybe I should talk about that. How does an individual build a relationship with their soul so that they're communicating with the deepest parts of themselves and not just the ego? Well, it's a little bit hard to share in a podcast, but what I can offer you is something simple and effective. Sing, dance, and tell stories. Be in community and connected to the earth. That's as simple as I can give it. Sing. Why sing? Because your voice is a harmonic, resonant vibration. As I was saying, when you speak true words, when the energy and intelligence of your soul, which is a connection from the Great Spirit moving through you, comes through in a way, it's like some of the verbiage here is Creator plays you like a flute. You're an open reed. There's a clarity which you can feel in all of your chakras, your whole spinal system and centers opens up because you're speaking from your totality. There's something that you can feel. And as you sing, you can work with the energy of your authentic voice. So this is something that I learned to do through actually speaking in tongues or glossolalia or simply just making noise. Ka batu spanda katasu san batrung. Now it's a silly thing at first, but what is the silliness? That's the conditioning of the shadow. That's the conditioning that comes up. And what came up for me was, I don't like my voice, or that is not right. And all these mind things keeping me out of the practice of just being and articulating. The glossolalia, the speaking in tongues, is like free movement like ecstatic dance, right? Sure, we can have a form dance, ballet, or something beautiful, something with rules and a certain form that makes it what it is. Or we can have ecstatic dance, which is free expression. No rhyme or reason. You don't even have to move with the music. You can pretend to be an animal. You can shake on the floor. You can do qigong. You can do whatever you need to do to feel. We're going to get into dancing in a moment. But singing, free singing, glossolalia singing, is like ecstatic dance for your voice. And it puts you in connection with a deep part of you, the unconditioned part of you, because the conditioned part of you speaks in terms of the language you inherited, because it has within it the acquired mind, the mind that you have been cultivating since you were born. Now, when you break free of the ordinary verbiage, just like when you break free from the ordinary ways you move in ecstatic dance, you have an opportunity to drop out of the mind in the ordinary way that you operate in, which is the ego, holding a certain body, mind, speech, articulation, a way of being in the world. It is a contracted state because it's the ego, right? It's not who you fully are in your expanded state. There's a certain way you hold your body, a certain way you speak that is representative of your ego's identity. And it's not fully solid, of course, because you're still acquiring that mind. But it's a mind that's been acquired from the past. And it's different from the soul's authentic impulse in any one moment moving through you, which is spontaneous, which is alive, which is representative of your authenticity. There's a totality to it. It's hard to express. It's just like they speak of the Tao, and that the Tao that cannot be spoken of is not the great. The Tao that can be spoken of is not the great Tao. I'm paraphrasing. I don't know if that's the correct articulation, but you get what I mean, right? It's like beauty. You can't really say what it is, but you can recognize it. So this is what I'm offering as a practice to get in connection with the soul, is the free movement of your voice, the free movement of your body, the free movement of free writing and telling stories, whether you're writing those stories or telling those with your friends. And being in community, especially a community of like-minded individuals showing up as their souls, because we are all reflections of one another. Flag post there, we'll get back into that. And being out in nature, because we're reflections of one another, we're reflecting ourselves. Reality is a mirror. So as we go to nature is its true nature. It's not pretending to be anybody else. You don't see the trees trying to be like Bill Clinton. You don't see... Why Bill Clinton? It's interesting. I'll have to psychoanalyze that later. So you don't see anything artificial in nature. Nature is natural. So when you go out in nature, there's an opportunity for you to drop the ego identity, the mind that you usually operate in the marketplace. And there's an opportunity for your being to come out, your authentic and spontaneous being to arise from inside, expressing itself outwardly. And this can help to decondition the mind that you go to the store with, the mind that you show up with that has a name and does so-and-so's job. Even if you're doing a spiritual job, sometimes there can still be quite a bit of the ego's identification and identity that places itself upon the experience. But in the forest, you dancing ecstatically, there's a freedom that develops that can decondition or de-armor some of the routine patterns. And the more that you do these, the more the soul will begin to speak through you with impulses. These impulses can be experienced at multiple levels. One will be kinesthetic. Your soul won't necessarily speak to you in terms of words. It'll often speak to the majority of people through impulses, through sensation, or attractions. You might feel a pull, like a physical pull, like you are a magnet being pulled in one direction. In order to get the sensitivity of where your soul is guiding you, we have to be able to decondition some of the mental patterns that guide us in our behaviors, especially fear-based beliefs that guide us towards behaviors and conditioning, and a whole life that's built around those control patterns. And we have to be able to come into a level of stillness, I would say. A stillness at which we can feel the subtle pulses of our body. That's why I practice a lot of standing Qigong. The soul can also communicate through feelings, through emotions. I mentioned your emotions are a guidance system. Positive emotions are like a pathway of least resistance. Negative emotions are guiding you to things you should stay away from, like when you touch something hot or when you touch something sharp. There's an immediate pain reaction and you're guided away, usually at a subconscious level, from those things. So too with our emotions, but people get so disconnected from their emotions and they do things because they think they have to, because they've been sold certain things or they're stuck in the 4 survival archetypes. Put a flag in there, we'll get back to that. And they stop listening to themselves and their soul. Fear-based conditioning rather than soul-based beliefs. And then the soul can also guide you through your higher psychic sensitivities. This can be through thoughts. Now there's a difference between thinking thoughts, which usually comes from the level of the ego, which requires more energy. And the thoughts are, as I understand it, more like taking in pieces of your past and reconfiguring them. But there's a little bit more to it. But that's not important. Thinking thoughts is different than receiving thoughts. Receiving thoughts is effortless. Like, have you ever been like lying on the grass, looking up at the clouds, and ideas are coming through you, like they're washing over you, and they can be linear and they can be non-linear, but they're just streaming in like the clouds in the sky. And there's a creativity to them, there's an aloofness to them, and there's an ease and flow. This is the difference between receiving thoughts. When I write, this is what happens to me. I sit down and I don't think. There's no thinking process as far as I'm aware. I just have ideas move through me and I write them. And often when I'm done writing, I reread it and it feels like I'm reading it for the first time, because I wasn't thinking those thoughts and it wasn't moving through the conscious mind in the same way that it usually does. I was allowing the energies to move through me, and the writing was much like a dance for me. I was just embodied in the moment, not really processing at the level of cognition what's happening, and then coming back to it retrospectively. This is the difference between thinking thoughts and receiving thoughts. When you're in the receiving mode, it's a functioning of your nervous system. You can be in the thinking or using energy yang mode, or you can be in the feminine yin receiving mode. And when we make connection with our soul, we're typically in the receiving mode when we're gaining the information, or we are in the receiving mode when we're gathering the information, because it's a receptive thing. So that's a little bit about how we can learn to listen to the soul more. And I should make a podcast on that, or I will make a podcast on that in a future time, as to how we can best connect with our soul. And of course, if soul is not a word that you use, that's fine. There's many different words that I use, such as higher mind. Some people don't like the idea of soul because it has a lot of association with various religious traditions. And when we get into the spiritual world, we as individuals, as I mentioned, need to be more and more aware of our thoughts, because they turn to things, but also our definitions, because there's many common words that we use, like spirituality and God. And this is why I create words like soulality, because I'm teaching myself to create my own definitions, and I'm defining the things that many of us use but don't necessarily have a clear and articulate definition, so that when we say it to other people, we may say the same word, but we're not always meaning the same thing. So I feel like there's a certain point at which in the spiritual process we get really clear on the fundamental definitions, because they form the axioms of our mind structure. And of course, these things change over time. So there's different levels or times at which we're changing these definitions as we continue to learn and grow. So as we're learning to listen to the soul is offering us desires that are representative of our true core vibration, of the themes that we came here to experience in this life. So, touching back in the idea of spirituality and soulality, spirituality, as I've demarcated it from soulality, is more the linear trajectory. So the story we tell here is that you're at a certain point in your spiritual evolution, and you have many past lives and all this past karma. And the root there is original sin and unconsciousness, and you're coming out of that into greater consciousness, and you're purifying your karmas, and you're releasing the negative sankharas from your mind. And ultimately, in some future time, once you work really hard for many lifetimes, you'll achieve or attain final enlightenment. And that's one story, and it's an equally valid, and I do think in what seems like a paradox, it's simultaneously true to what I'm about to say next. The soulality way of experiencing the story of life is non-linear. So the whole linear time frame perspective of past and future lives breaks down in the recognition that time is not real, and that all things happen simultaneously. So the idea of past lives turns into simultaneous lives happening all at once. And we are at some level just choosing to experience ourselves in this timeline. So this throws away the whole idea of past karmas coming back to us. And because it's a non-dual approach, right? We get away with the good, bad karma because everything's happening all at once. So there's a whole different underlying understanding here, which offers a whole different pathway. And if you walk the spiritual path, the linear time frame, the ultimate and highest goal is enlightenment, and everything else is secondary to that. That's the hierarchical piece, the driving engine of your life. Whereas the soulality path is, the story kind of goes like this. From a higher perspective, which is your non-physical soul, you've chosen to have an experience, which is this human life, and to explore certain themes. Those themes you've determined before you came into this life, and you can, of course, change them. You can always choose to switch different timelines as you go. But you've chosen to explore a theme or certain themes, and within that, you'll have certain desires. Maybe a desire for family, maybe a desire for sex, maybe a desire to have a business fail and then come back and make a really successful business and have an underdog story theme. All these different things you can decide to have. Because, yeah, you are the creator of all of life. You know, you're one with source energy. At the level of spirit, anything is possible. So you've chosen. You've chosen to have these experiences. And the work on some level here is manifesting what we want versus what we don't want. So part of our theme, part of the game we play, is working with the old conditioning. Now, I know this puts us back into a linear time frame perspective, but I'm going to jump a little bit back and forth between these because as I talked about linear time frame, they're happening simultaneously. Both are equally valid and true. Samskara is nirvana, nirvana is samsara. You're limited and you are the expansive. These are all paradoxes, and the more we walk the spiritual path, we integrate both of these as equally valid, and we play both games simultaneously. Matter and spirit, linear and non-linear. So from the linear perspective, we're working with the old subconscious patterns because our life is a result of what we have been consciously and unconsciously creating. So part of that is through what we've inherited in terms of our society, and part of that is what we have inherited from our past karma and the genetic inheritance of our parents and their patterns and their desires, because the subconscious is that wellspring of where we store our phobias, our fears, our likes and dislikes, right? So at a deep level, our subconscious is manifesting those things into our life. And this is why I mentioned the spiritual journey. At a certain point, we become aware of the connection between our innermost thoughts, feelings, and how they create the pathway towards our destiny. They are influencing our manifestations. So our journey is to work with the law of attraction to create a resonant vibration that is in alignment with our soul and our desires, the desires that we want to attract, and allow the universe to do the rest. What we work against is any old limiting belief structure and the negative emotion that it attracts, that shifts our vibration into a fear-based belief system. It shifts our vibration out of our true resonant frequency, which is our soul shining through, because it's all based on this idea of the law of attraction, right? Your body, your emotions, and your mind are creating a frequency. At the level of vibration, you have a resonant frequency. And if you're thinking thoughts that are out of alignment with your soul, which is love and truth, then you won't have the high resonant frequency that's going to attract your highest path. You're going to attract lower level desires of the ego, and they're not going to bring you fulfillment. So part of the work is to identify what we want in our desires, and part of the work is to align ourselves with our soul. This is why it took quite a bit of time to articulate a bit about dancing and singing, telling stories, etc. Because that's not necessarily in my manifestation formula, and I haven't heard it as part of many other people's manifestation formulas. But I think it's so essential because that gives us that proper resonant frequency to attract what we want. I want to touch on the flag I put in earlier about reality as a mirror. This goes with the law of attraction. Reality is a mirror, meaning we're giving off a vibration and we're receiving it. Now, we're not in the realm of pure mind where every thought we think is immediately manifested, because we could express it as that's not the game we chose to play. We chose to play the game of coming into matter, into this physical experience, and that we have desires and dreams. And if you can desire it, if you do desire it, immediately is fulfilled because you are creator consciousness. But it may not be fulfilled in this moment in linear time frame perception. Does that make sense? So what we've done is we've created a time lag between your desires, the ones that you focus on, and when they manifest. Could be this lifetime, could be another lifetime. But when you have a desire and you ask, it's like prayer. As soon as you ask, it's received immediately, no questions asked. But your focus on it matters. And there's a time lag. There's a time lag, and the time lag is not a bad thing. Many people want things, a lot of money, a soulmate, success in their business, and they want it now. But that can throw them off because the more that they want it now, they may not be truly experiencing what they're experiencing now without resistance. They're focusing on what they don't have and what they want in some future scenario. I'm going to get into the manifestation formula soon, which will help to clarify this. But it's really important that we know that reality is a mirror, and there's a time lag there between what we feel and put out and what we get back. Okay, let's get into the manifestation formula. I think that'll be smart. Okay, so it has 7 parts. The first part is clarify. Second part is to clear. Third part is to develop your why. And then the next 4 are my 4 principles to follow your highest love without expectation, stay regulated, and clear limiting beliefs. So I'm going to break those down. First, clarify. Clarify refers to clarifying your goals, your dreams. This is your mind's focus. We want to be able to focus the direction of our thoughts, generally for a period of 5, 10, or 15 minutes to create momentum behind our thoughts. So manifestation formulas are best done in the morning because the mind is the clearest. All the action and program patterns of being and relating to the world aren't activated. As soon as you hop on Facebook and all those other things, you're opening up all these mental, emotional programs. We're quite clear in the morning, as clear as we can be. So we want to clarify our intention and the direction of our mind. So what I often instruct individuals to do, I have forms on this, is to have a list or an image, activating the left and the right brain, of the most important parts of their dream, goals, and desires. So it's really clear. So that there's some kind of representation, and this can be a visualization that you do, but there's some kind of mental direction. Because the finding here is when we direct the energies of the mind in a certain direction, great English, Zach. When we direct the mind's energy in a certain direction, There's a momentum behind it. If we carry through on that momentum, we build a force behind it. We want to build enough of this momentum in the beginning of the day so it carries us through the day. This is us consolidating the resonant frequency within us. Because as soon as we go out into the world, advertising, this person wanting this person wanting us to be a part of their dream, all kinds of things. We want to build enough of our dream in our field that it's clear, that it's stabilized, so that when we walk out in the world, we're living our dream and we can trust that the universe will handle the details. So there's a clarification period. So what the activities there are, you can write about it. You can think thoughts in alignment with it. You can draw it. You can visualize it. The idea is to get an emotional energy built up behind it. We're going to get a little bit more into that in the why. So first we want to clarify, and then we want to clear. Clearing refers to, limiting beliefs, unprocessed emotion, negative emotion of any kind. When you start to articulate your dream, I want a soulmate, and I want a multi-million dollar business, and I want to travel the world, and that might feel really good to say all these things, and then all of a sudden your mind's like, what? You're going to have a soulmate, and then what? How much time are you going to spend with her? Multi-million dollar business? Are you going to be able to handle all those employees? What about your taxes? All these negative energies and beliefs can come to the surface. In fact, it's kind of the process, right? They're coming up to be purified. These are the limitations of our mind as it's currently operating. So we continue to expand, to grow our vision. And then what the anchoring piece is, what's holding us back, is all of the limiting beliefs that we have. So we want to be able to clear those. We want to be able to recognize them. We want to see them as limiting beliefs. We want to be able to shift our mind into the positive belief that's in alignment with universal principles. This is why I offered that you look up Arnold Patton's Universal Principles, because there's a way in which the universe operates, and it's not through limiting beliefs. That's the way the ego operates. So if we have a belief, I want these things, I don't have the money. Okay, there's a limiting belief there. We can always shift it to a belief that we can always affirm, such as I have everything I need when I need it. That's a belief not only about money, but about the fundamental nature of reality. We're always given what we need when we need it. There's never a time when we don't have what we need when we need it. When we shift ourselves to that belief, we shift ourselves into abundance, because you always have the abundance you need when you need it. Maybe not how you want it from a perspective of lack, desire, and ego, but you always have what you need when you need. This is important. Remember, the universe is responding to your frequency. If you're focused on what you don't have, that's the frequency you're giving off. So we want to be able to shift out of any limiting beliefs. And I made a whole episode on how to clear, so that we can build the resonant frequency of truth and love without hesitation. So this is where we get into the why. So clarify your dream, clear any obstacles, and then why. Why do you want this? This is another way to help get past the ego's desire, because the ego's desire will typically be a lower level selfish nature, whereas the why of your soul is typically more inclusive. It typically wants to share its experience with a soulmate, with a family, with a lot of people that it can help. Maybe that's doing something that's quite simple, but there's an understanding there that there's something bigger. Maybe your dream is to go off alone and hike a mountain. And that may not directly, as one can see it in a small way, help a lot of people. But maybe you'll act as an example of somebody who did something courageous, and you were creating within yourself a connection to your soul, which was changing the very fundamental nature of your being. This is what people really respond to. Not what you do, it's who you are. One of the greatest gifts my parents ever gave me is the gift of who they are, their happy marriage, how they showed up authentically. They never knew that that was the gift that they were giving me, but just by being, this is what I will remember them most for. Just who they are and how they loved. So it doesn't matter what you do. If you're following your soul's path, you're doing your dharma. What you need to do to be in alignment with the universal principles, with the Tao. This is the most important thing. Cultivating your why is where I offer that people, once they've connected with their visualization of their dream in any way that they know how to, then they cultivate their why. This is the emotional energy of why you do it. I've been working to cultivate or to manifest a soulmate. And I have a few songs that I sing. And when I sing them, I put them on repeat sometimes. I can bring myself to tears because I have that much emotional energy behind there. This for me is like a hallmark of I've cultivated the energy. It's a cultivation. It's like contentment. It's like equanimous joy. These are things that aren't tied to things outside of oneself. So there are practices like movement, meditation, breath work, dance, creating art, going out in nature, which can help us to cultivate our why, especially when we think of who that future soulmate is, that future family, all the people we'll be able to help when we're doing what we love. This why is so key because, as I mentioned, as we go out into the world, distraction and all these kinds of things can come and pull us off. We want to be able to be anchored into the state that we want. This is an internal state we've cultivated, and the more time we spend cultivating it, the stronger it is in our resonant frequency. From here, the manifestation goes on to the 4 principles I share, which are a re-articulation of Bashar's 4 principles. So these are to act on your highest excitement or greatest love, to the best of your abilities without expectation, to stay regulated, positive, and receptive, and then this is kind of a repeat from an earlier point, but this is done in a different way, is to clear limiting beliefs as they arise. So how does this all work? So first you clarify your dream, build clarity to it, focus your mind on it, clear any limiting beliefs, and then you build the emotional force behind it, your why. Now this would typically be done for 20 to 60 to 90 minutes in the morning to build the energy. And remember, this includes your movement, meditation, and breath work. So this is going to help your physical body, your emotional body, your mental body, and adjust your vibration and center in on your manifestations. Now, the 4 principles is what you take out into the world. So the 4 principles, after you've done your preparations for the day, to the best of your abilities, act on your greatest love and highest excitement. Now you may work a job that's not preferable and it's out of alignment with what you truly want. Okay, well, you're not working the job 24 hours a day. In the time that you do have to make decisions, in those times, act on your highest excitement. What is most representative of who you are and how you want to live? What is your greatest calling, your purpose, your mission? These are all things that I help people to articulate through some of my coaching worksheets. And this can be something done in the non-preferable job. Even as you're doing the non-preferable job, how can you do it in a way that is most exciting, which is most representative of who you are? So you're showing up as your soul and not your ego. As soon as you do, you shift. You shift out of the individual you were before, and new opportunities, pathways, and a magical path of synchronicity appears to arise. Now, do this as often as you can, for as long as you can, for as best as you can. Number 2, without expectation. So move without hesitation. This is the full embodiment and knowing of your prayer. This is when you pray well. We're going to go into some troubleshooting at the end, but I'll offer this one here. When an individual prays, they can ask and it's immediately received. Now, it's a time lag before it actually manifests, so we need to have some level of focus on it before it manifests. If we have expectations about how it should go, these can build beliefs and negative emotions, and they can keep us out of the present. Once we've asked and cultivated enough energy behind it, and that's the first 3, the clarify, clear, and building the why, then we can let go of it. We don't need to constantly be praying, oh, I want this, oh, I want this, oh, I want this. It's not a matter of saying that 1,000 times in repetition, because often we're focusing on what we want, which is not what we currently have. We want to build some energy behind it and thought and feeling, and then let it go. Ask, masculine, and then receive, feminine. We want to be in the receptive mode, which goes on to number 3. Stay in a regulated and positive and receptive mode. Regulated refers to a regulated nervous system, best done through breath work. Positivity. This isn't negative positivity or toxic positivity, however you want to say that, where you're only seeing the positive, which is resistant to the negative. No. This is a recognition of where you're honestly at, positive or negative, in a capacity to come to neutrality, because you can see both the positive and the negative as equally valid, and you're not avoiding one or the other. And then it's a conscious choice to shift to the positive, because that's what is preferable. And then you're staying in a receptive state. Receptive state. Receptive state is feminine. Receptive state is a receiving and flowing with life, not a controlling and a forcing way. This is how we receive manifestations. There's an act of doing and putting out energy and work, which is also part of it, because there's a certain amount of action that we must take, and our soul will help us to guide us. But there's also a need to be in the receptive mode in order to receive. Otherwise, we can block our manifestations, because we can't simply be in the doing mode all the time. Otherwise, we won't allow the universe to guide us, because we must listen. We must listen to receive thoughts rather than just thinking thoughts and staying in the ego's thought patterns and ways of orienting to life. We must be able to create space to open our mind so that the soul can speak in our day-to-day, so that it can show us these little pointings, which might be you're walking home and it says, take this trail, and then you go and you meet somebody new. These are the listenings that we need to be ever more conscious of as we continue to follow this pathway of our soul. And then clear any limiting beliefs. So this is a little bit of a repeat, but this is more the formula for going about your day. So as you're going about your day, if you start to feel negative emotion, if you start to feel contraction, if you start to feel disconnected from being in alignment with your prayer, which is like a field you feel where you feel supported and trusted and flowing with the universe. If you start to feel out of that internal alignment and you're creating resistance within yourself, assess, what am I feeling and what do I believe to feel this way? Because all of our negative emotions are built upon beliefs. If we can get at those underlying beliefs and we can identify what's coming up, good. Then we can cut those at the root and we can shift the story. Because this is the empowerment process that we go on. We get to understand what are the fundamental axioms that have been holding us back from walking towards our dreams, to moving forward without hesitation. And the more we can be mindful of belief systems as they arise, we're doing a meditative process of getting to know the fundamental axioms of our mind. This involves a lot of awareness, more awareness than most people. This is why it's part of the conscious journey of a spiritual or a soul person, to continue to get to know their mind at more deeper and subtle and subconscious levels, to better understand their manifestations, to be a better creator in this life, to have their manifestations come true, their deepest desires. And that's it. You go about the world in that way, to go through the whole thing, clarify your dreams, spend some time, 5 or 10 minutes, directing your thoughts, your mind, your visualizations towards them. If any limiting beliefs or negative emotions arise at that moment, clear them. And then develop your why, the emotional energy of why you want that. Connect with your soul at this point and all the souls of the individuals you want to help and connect with. Once this is complete and you've built enough of that emotional energy behind it, go about your day. Go about the tasks that you have set before you and follow the 4-step formula. In each and every moment, or as in many moments as you can, follow what your greatest passion is, what is most representative. And you will attract the people, the circumstances, the experiences, the challenges, everything that goes with it. Now, manifestation formula in this way is an articulation of a more feminine pathway. I have not touched too much on the action and orientation, which is more of the masculine pathway, although I do have a fair amount of coaching material on this. Some law of attraction things there can be a lot of nuance to all this work, and this is why it's best to work with a coach who can work with you, because a lot of stuff comes up as we're on this path. Just as I have help, I help others. This is the way that we all mutually support one another. But in light of this, here are a few ways of troubleshooting why manifestations may not be appearing, whether you're following this formula, which I have worksheets on to have it all written out, because I know it's a little bit hard to remember all of it unless you've been writing it down as we go. Here are go. Well, you may also have limiting beliefs. You may also have limiting beliefs that you're not fully aware of that are contributing to why the manifestation is not there. This is why I developed the 8-dimensional holistic alignment coaching system, which is a comprehensive system that goes over all different aspects of our body, mind, and key areas where we have conditioning or underlying belief systems, such as those relating to finances, sex, God, love, truth, etc. When we go through a comprehensive analysis, we have a clear understanding of the very deep and, well, comprehensive way in which our mind processes reality, and just how many beliefs are operating in kind of like a constellation with one another. Because it's not simply that we often have one belief, it's belief is attached to another belief, which is attached to another belief. So working with an individual who can be a mirror is very valuable in identifying beliefs that we are having trouble seeing within ourselves. Is the cognitive component. A lot of the worksheets that I have are the cognitive component. Some of the coaching that I do is the cognitive component. We can get so far with our mind, but we want to be able to have more tools to move the energy, which is why breath work is so key. This moves not only the energy of old blocked emotion, but it can help to create more clarity in the system to clear limiting beliefs out. The underlying energetic architecture of who we are is an energy body. The breath is a fundamental energy, and when we work now, I'm just going to drop that there and leave it. That could be a whole episode, but know that your breathing process is the creative force coming from energy into full manifestation, which is the vitalization of your physical body, right? From your spirit, which is intangible, which is to the body. This is the process of creation from mind to matter, from energy to form. So as you're breathing in, with every breath, you are recreating the life that you have. You are, in some sense, re-upping the beliefs that you have. As you consciously think new thoughts or repeat thoughts that you want to think that are in alignment with you and breathe in, you're repatterning the system. As you breathe out, you're letting go of old thoughts, old belief patterns. In the system quite quickly. This happens through quite expansive times or contractive times in our life when we go through experiences like death or love, that we can quickly repattern the fundamental nature of our being because of the amount of energy behind our thought. This is the key. This is really key, and why a lot of people don't really get what they want, following what they want. Or two, they're not putting enough energy behind it. They're holding themselves back. The limiting beliefs are what they're holding themselves back. If you know at the deepest core of your being that you can have everything that you want, that you're working a job that's not preferable, and you don't have the love of your life in your life, and you know that you can do it, you would put everything on the line to do it. This is where I like to get people, so that they're willing to make those decisions and choices, to book trips, to do things that are completely off the be, that they're actively transforming into them, and they're readying themselves for the circumstances they know are happening, even though the world isn't necessarily reflecting anything back to them in the moment that's indicating their success or that they're going to move in that direction. They know because they can get there in their mind before it's already happened. This is the individual who has their manifestations accelerated and come true because they trust themselves. They trust the basic principles of the universe. They know themselves through them, and they're so connected with their soul, which is truth and love, that they're not steered this way or that way. They know. When your prayer is a knowing, when it's not something you have to repeat, oh, I want this, oh, I want this, oh, I want this, like the mind of a child. When it's a knowing, this is destiny, this is why I chose to be here, then it happens, and it happens in perfect time, and that person's typically at ease and of joy to be around, and they attract all the beautiful people in their life. If your manifestation's not coming through, what's the resistance in you? One of the best ways, I can't think of a better way to release resistance than breath work. The exhalation is your body's surrender response. Learning to properly exhale, I have done well over 10,000 hours, and I'm still learning it. It's a process, it's a practice, and we can learn to do it. Now that I've learned to surrender my exhale, I'm learning to surrender my exhale in cold water. I'm learning to surrender my exhale when I'm being choked. Limiting beliefs, emotions, but knowing the breath is so key. This is why I spend so much time emphasizing practice, 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 because ultimately all this manifestation form so much cognitive work. It's not that much cognitive work once you get the hang of it. Once you know the underlying principles of the universe, it's much more like a dance. Not so mental, not so of the mind. The thoughts come because you're receiving them. You're just acting and doing, following the magnetic impulses that drive you forward. The last troubleshoot I'll go over is the 4 survival archetypes. This is something articulated by Caroline Myss. These are the child, the victim, the saboteur, and the prostitute. I'm going to go over these fairly quickly, but they're fascinating content. Maybe another podcast on these will be something important to do. So your manifestation is you being an adult, you taking responsibility for your life and what you are consciously creating and subconsciously creating. Now, as you do this, the old child archetype says, I don't want to take responsibility. Somebody else can take responsibility for me. I don't want to do that. I can't do that. These are the words of a child. So if you find yourself saying the I can't and I don't want to, check in. Check in if that's your inner child not wanting to take responsibility. Because what happens is the more you do these practices and the more the momentum of your life takes hold, your dreams pull you forward. They're a organizing principle and a driving engine. They have an energy behind them. And you'll find the things that you're resistant to, taxes, long hours, sleepless nights, things you wouldn't ordinarily do because most people orient towards pleasure and away from discomfort. Things you wouldn't ordinarily do, you're willing to do because you know they're part of the pathway to your manifestation. Okay, so you want this business? Well, work long hours. Put out events and no one's going to show and have to go through all these things that might be challenging. Now, your inner child might put up a little show and throw a tantrum, but the more you connect with your adult, your empowered archetypes, you'll be able to overcome those. You want to see the victim archetype. Why are you calling yourself a victim? This is patterning. This is patterning from a very young age, and I can honestly say that these things continually show up, and I'm continuing to learn from them. It's not like I've stepped out of all these archetypes, and maybe I will at a certain point, but I notice them. They're just something to be aware of from my shadow. So maybe we do get to a point, or maybe there are individuals who've completely moved past all of these, and I recognize that that's possible as a possibility. But I just think they're like themes. I continue to come on new challenges, limitations of my mind and what I've done in the linear time frame perspective, and then I see ways in which I'm being a victim to that until that is deconditioned out of the system and I'm fully operating from that soul and growth based understanding. The saboteur, the ways that we sabotage ourselves. I used to do this a lot with success and money because I didn't have a hold on my lower level desires for sex and drugs, and I thought if I got a bunch of money I would just fuck up my whole life. Prostitution in the way that Caroline Myss talks about it is when we do things for money that are out of alignment with our soul. And my story and many other stories is that we started out in this journey in a less conscious state, and we're doing the work to orient and shift our life into a conscious creation of what we do want. And the job that we have that is less preferable is paying for the schooling or the education or part of the process. So it's not that I'm instructing everyone to just quit their job unless you have the belief systems to support that and you have a way that you can stay in a positive and regulated state while you do that. If you can't, it's pretty difficult because as soon as you throw yourself out of that state, law of attraction immediately responds to that. So a job that is non-preferable can be something that is preferable if it's helping to support you on your next step. So understand where you're at, understand where you're going, and this will help you to go that much further faster. Honesty. So I think that's it. That's all I'd like to share about this. I'll do a conclusion here. So in this episode, I spoke about manifestation, something very important in the conscious community as we become more aware of the relationship between our thoughts, how they create things, how the energy behind what we think has a momentum, has a force. In this, I spoke a little bit about different spiritual paths and how the path of manifestation, as I see it, is more the path of the soul desiring to have experiences, which is not good or bad. I encourage us to see beyond that because there's a lot of conditioning about desire being bad. And I talked a little bit about how the soul is something we calibrate to, because we don't want to be manifesting the ego's desires. We want to be manifesting the soul's desires. And we want to know the underlying principles of the law of attraction and how the universe is a mirror and how our frequency is what we're putting out, and that's what we're getting back. I gave the manifestation formula that I created and follow, that is to clarify the dream, clear negative beliefs, cultivate the emotional energy of why, act on our highest love, without expectation, staying in a regulated and positive and receptive state. And then once again, as we're going out in our life, to clear the limiting beliefs and negative emotions as they rise, maintaining our true resonant vibration of love and truth, and then allowing the universe to handle the details. If your manifestations aren't coming true, double down on the limiting beliefs. What beliefs do you hold subconsciously or consciously? If you can't identify them on your own, work with a practitioner, maybe an energy healer, who can tune into your subtle body to see those blocks, or maybe a coach at the level of coaching who can get at some of those fundamental axioms of what you're operating in. Learn to decrease resistance. This is key to being in the receptive mode. Best way to do this that I know of is the breath. And then be aware of the 4 survival archetypes of the child, the victim, the saboteur, and the prostitute. Thank you all for listening. Blessings for your manifestations. They're so important to this world. As I mentioned, you being connected on the path, not the receiving of your manifestations, just the path, like fully surrendered to your path. It's all it's about. From that soulity, non-linear perspective, there's no goal beyond this moment to strive for, to attain to. It's the realization of the perfection of what already is. And when we're operating from that place, we're putting out that frequency of freedom, of liberation, of love, and recognition of where anyone's at, however they're walking their spiritual way. Whether they're going through something hard, whatever it is, when you're in that field of truth and love, you're putting out an energy that is offering them an opportunity to vibe the way you vibe in, which is a good way to roll. True to yourself, full of love. Can't ask for anything else. So I thank you for that. And I'm excited to see all that you create. Let me know if there's any way that I can support you on that journey with future podcasts, with worksheets, or if you decide to come work with me. Let's co-create together. Blessings and good chi. Aya Om.